we can start the streaming. Streaming begins. Should soon be online. Let's launch up Discord. Yeah, hi friend. Oh yes, that's for sure. Hello, hello. We are just about to start recording a new video at the end of the Unreal content. Just waiting for a few people to hop on before I begin, but it looks like there's already 8 of you, which is great. So in this video, we're mostly talking about our gun architecture that we've been working on for the past couple of videos. We're going to be pretty much finalizing that and getting the last bits in place. So that's going to be fun. First step of that is going to be reviewing our gun architecture. Reviewing what we're going to be attempting to do here and how we're going to be putting the control back in the hands of the AI. So without further ado, I'm actually going to dive in. Hello, everybody joining us on the live stream bit by bit. Now, when you'll have noticed this from other live streams, the bit at the bottom says not recording, then that is when I will be coming over and looking at the live chat. If it says anything else down there at the bottom, then you will need to wait for me to read your replies because I'm actually recording and won't be able to take a look. Okay, so without further ado, let's begin. So the first thing on our to-do list is to review the architecture that we have set out in the previous lectures. So let's start off with that. The architecture that we've got here laid out, that's exactly what we had previously, tells us that, well, we've got our time, just as a review. The components that we're looking at are the BP gun, BP character, and the gun is querying the character. We spawn projectiles from the gun, and that spawned projectile then triggers an animation to be played on the mesh attached to the character. Potentially, it triggers an animation on a third-person mesh and on a first-person mesh. So that's all good. What have we got so far? Well, we've definitely got a gun now spawning the projectile, and when it spawns a projectile, it tells the first-person mesh at least to play an animation. So we've got that pointing the right way round. However, what we haven't got is the trigger from the character going to the gun. So that is the bit that we're going to be trying to tackle in this lecture. So let's review, we've reviewed that architecture. Let's revise binding the input in C++, because if we want to have that trigger, if we go over to the SO5 testing grounds project, then you'll notice I've actually upgraded my Visual Studio here to 2017. Now, there's very little change, so you can do very much the same thing here as well. The only thing you're going to have to do is deal with this dialog box here, the Windows SDK version 10. Just say OK to the defaults, and that will be fine. And it will load up your project as it has done before, as usual. All good. So we want to go over to Unreal Editor. This is the usual log that pops up when I haven't got my built light maps. I go into Dynamic Character, Behavior, and we'll have a look at our BP character again. So what's the current setup? We've got a firing method which calls on trigger on the gun. And what we want to do is call that on trigger. Sorry, we've got a little bit of noise here. I'm going to have to stop the recording and start from scratch. Sorry, folk, we have a little bit of toddler noise in the background. Hollywood magic indeed. Just sorting out that, and we will start afresh. Probably with a stronger start anyway, so no problems. So just for an idea, what stage of the course are you guys at the moment? People on the live stream, what are you currently, what stage have you done? How much have you seen? What kind of audience am I talking to? Are you on the Unreal course at all, or are you mostly Unity folks with a bit of a voyeuristic interest in Unreal? Okay, I think we can carry on. The noise has disappeared, so I'm going to go ahead and start from scratch. So let's start the recording. So a few lectures back, we had put together an architecture to put the gun back in control of spawning projectiles and basically having a more physical analogy. So let's review that and see where we stand with having re-architected our code to achieve it. This is the improved architecture that we had looked at. We've got the gun responsible for spawning the projectiles, the character pulling a trigger essentially on the gun, and the gun kind of queries that trigger status. And then we had the spawn projectile animating the mesh, so sending an animation directly to the mesh. That could be the first person mesh or the third person mesh. What do we have so far, and what do we still need to do? Well, so far we've got the animation in place. Yes, the gun is responsible for animating at least the first person mesh. It doesn't do the third person mesh yet, but we can do that later. It does spawn the projectile as well, and it has an on-fire method, which is essentially how we notify it from the character. Now, the only problem is that trigger is not getting pulled by the character, it's getting pulled by the animation controller at the moment, and by a wacky kind of roundabout route. So how do we go ahead and correct that? Let's see the places where this is going wrong, I'm going to go into my BP character and have a look at our fire action as a starting point. So the fire action sets a boolean shooting and not shooting, and that boolean is then picked up by the animation system, if we remember, and that animation system is then the thing responsible for calling fire over here. So that's not what we want. That's not ideal at all. What we really want to be doing is calling fire directly. So quick revision of, as it says here, revision of binding input in C++. I'm going to remove this fire action altogether, save it, compile, and head on over to Visual Studio. You'll notice this Visual Studio may look slightly different to what we've seen before because it is Visual Studio 2017. I've updated at this point because it's come out, and there's very, very little difference. It will pop up a dialog at the beginning asking you for the Windows SDK version. You can just go with the default, click OK, and everything will work out of the box. So I'm going to go into Sources, SO5 Testing Grounds, Character, and then I'm going to grab the Mannequin CPP and launch that up. And using our Mannequin CPP, what are we going to do? Well, we are going to be binding input. The usual place to bind input would be the setup player input component. However, there is an interesting point for us to note here, that because we want to bind input to the gun, so in fact, let's write that input first of all. So I'd have the player input component, and on that player input component, I would go ahead and bind input. Now, what we can do is use our first person as a starting point. So if I go and open player first person character.cpp, that old first person class can be our starting point for figuring this out. And you can see we have this bind action, got bind action jump. We can use that as an idea. I'm going to just copy that bind action bit as the method call. Basically, it's not auto-completing for me because it's still building the symbols, parsing the solution down here, because I recently cleared out all my caches. So if I do a bind action fire, i.e. pressed is good, and then what's the object we want to do it on? We want to do it on our gun. And what is the method we want? Well, we want a gun on on fire. There we go. Seems to be auto-completing for me now. If we were to do this, and I'm not going to do it, it's going to crash Unreal. Now, why is it going to crash Unreal? Because of the order in which these methods are called. Our begin play is the method responsible for setting up the gun actor in the world, and that's actually called after setup player input component. So what will happen is you'll call setup player input component, the gun will be null, and the bind action will fail and cause everything to come crashing down around our ears, and the whole Unreal editor will pop its clogs. So what we want to do is actually do this in begin play. But again, beware, you do have access to input component from the class, so we can do input component, arrow, bind action, fire, gun on fire. Now, this seems okay on the surface of it, but what can happen is these mannequins are used both for the first person and third person, so both by the AI and the player-controlled pawns. So if you were to use the mannequin with an AI-controlled pawn, then setup player input isn't called, and there is no input component. So this bind action, again, is going to fail. So we need to make sure that it's not going to fail by doing an if input component is not null. And if we wrap it in that, then we know this is going to work both for AI controlled and non-AI controlled. Okay, so that's just a little bit of a caveat emptor for the begin play and setup player input components, and in terms of the order of execution of those two. So let's head back into Unreal, compile, and see what happens there. Now just twiddle my thumbs while C++ compiles. Apologies if you've seen an interruption in the stream. I was just switching over to hopefully a better connection so that there aren't any streaming issues for you. Okay, so the compilation has finally finished and we can go ahead and hit play and hopefully get no crashes. Okay, no crashes, that's fantastic. I count myself very lucky when Unreal starts and I've written some C++ code and I don't get the editor crashing. So let's click our button and see whether anything is going to fire. Okay, it hasn't, but it does also still say that it's compiling the C++ code. So let's just check that out. Gonna go have a look at, okay, now it thinks the compile is finally complete. Let's see. Yes, we are able to fire using the binding that we have just set up using C++. Fantastic news. Okay, so what's up next on our list of to-dos? We've bound input to C++, and that's basically the kind of binding we want to be doing from the AI as well. However, if we look at it currently, so I save this, the challenge is going to be the next thing we do. But if I look at it currently, then I go up to the AI. They are still able to fire, but how is that? Because they aren't calling the fire method at any point. Only we are doing that. So what should we be doing? How should the AI be doing its firing? Well, this is your challenge to figure out. I'd like you to enable direct firing control for the AI. What do I mean by that? I want the AI to be calling via its actions the fire method, or the what we're going to call the trigger method, on the character BP, on the mannequin. So what you're going to do first of all is rename that fire function that's on the mannequin to pull trigger, to be closer to our architecture. Then we should make sure that we remove all references in the animation layer to that fire function, because it's no longer the animation layer that should be driving our firing or not. And then I'd like you to ensure that the AI is able to fire, and you're going to have to go around and change the AI actions a little bit to make sure that they're calling the right methods and they're not doing a setting of a Boolean and unsetting of a Boolean. They're now just going to be calling a pull trigger method on the mannequin. So pause the video and have a go at this challenge. Okay, guys, how are you finding this so far? I'd like to hear some feedback. Are you guys just are you following along, or are you just trying to listen in and see what's going on here? I see we still have 5 of you guys online. Not hearing very much from you, but do let me know if you are following along or whether the stream quality is still bad as YouTube is telling me, which would be a bit of a shame. Passively learning, that's what I like to hear. No, we'll hopefully be able to, when you get to this stage in the course, you'll also be actively learning. That'll be the end goal, what we hope you will get out of it. So yeah, do let me know if there's anything that seems unclear at this stage. I can work it into the next half of the video right now, right here. So you can have your impact if you go ahead and say what you don't like or want to see more of. We can actually live edit it into the video. Need to keep hydrated, lots of water. When talking all the time, your throat gets very dry. So what do you guys think of the game as a whole? Is there anything that we can improve here? Obviously, we've got the problem with the AI not chasing us at the moment. They're also rapidly firing a bit too rapidly. And we're very soon going to be working on going through this level, adding more AI into every chamber, and perhaps adding in a scoreboard up around the top or a score overhead display. Those are some of the things coming up. We're going to add some footsteps because you can hear at the moment there is nothing to hear. Some of the features planned and coming up. Do let me know what you think. Okay, we're going to go back into the challenge and resume for those who are following the video. Okay, welcome back. How did you get on with that challenge? Do let me know in the Q&A and the community, and I will want to know how this challenge is matched up to your level and so on. So let's go ahead. I'm going to do this challenge in two parts. The first part is going to be removing firing from the animation BP. So I'm going to dive into that. If I open up my my Visual Studio first of all, need to find the right thing. I always forget where I'm going. So if I open up the mannequin.h, the first thing is going to be removing or renaming that fire function to a pull trigger function. So we've got it here. It's a U function blueprint callable. It's called fire, and I'm going to rename it to, as we said, pull trigger. There we go. It's should now complain about mannequin CPP that this fire function is no longer called fire. It's not caught up with me yet, but I'm going to preempt it and rename the function in the C++ file as well, the pull trigger. And then we're going to head over into Unreal and compile, and hopefully we will see a few broken blueprints with any luck. As much as I like C++ over Blueprint, it really does take a while to compile. Does take just that bit longer. What's going on with Visual Studio? Why is it pulling that over the top? My word, this is taking forever. Is it because I had changed a header file? Must just not like it when you change header files. Okay. So that compile is done. Let's see if we can find any blueprint errors anywhere. The place I'm expecting them is in animation. So let's go over to our dynamic character animations, open up the ABP-TP, the animation blueprint third person. And from that animation blueprint third person, I do expect there to be a compile error or two. Yes, there is. Perfect. So this will enable us to strip out that fire component much more easily. So I'm going to search for the fire method and where it's being called. It's being called in response to an animation notify. Well, we can strip out all of that. We don't need it anymore. And is there another instance of fire being called? Not to the best of my knowledge. So we can actually go ahead and remove all code to do with firing in here. We've got variables to do with firing, such as shooting, which you can see enables the shooting animation. But we no longer need that because we're going to be doing the shooting animation directly from the gun, as we've seen in an architectural overview. So I'm going to go into my anim graph and have a look at anything that might be to do with our firing animation. Okay, so we've got this shooting boolean here that goes into a blend posed by bool with a fire rifle iron sights additive. Let's nuke that. You'll notice that it will now look completely weird because we've got this apply mesh space additive node with nothing going into the additive node. You know that if you don't put an identity into one of these mesh space additive nodes, then it will look funky like this. So we don't actually need it at all. So I'm just going to pass through that component to local up to this other blend space for the dead pose. Okay, so now what we've got seems to be much better. It won't respond to shooting anymore, but we expect that. And one more thing that we want to do is remove that shooting variable altogether because it's no longer necessary. It's in use, it says, but yes, I'm going to delete it and see where it breaks. Hasn't broken my animation blueprint, so I'm going to save my animation blueprint. But I do expect it to have broken a few other things. So because we've removed and rebound our fire component, our fire binding from the BP character, which we just did earlier in this lecture, it's no longer broken there. But another place where shooting may or may not be set is over in the AI. So if we go over to character, AI, and the place I'm expecting it to happen is in the shooting BT task. So let's open that up. And sure enough, we've got a bunch of stuff here about aiming and shooting. So what am I going to do? Well, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this block of code down here. Why am I going to get rid of this block of code? Because it's about stopping aiming and stopping shooting. We don't need that. We can get rid of both of these. Let's do all of this response to the AI abort, so I'm going to get rid of that. And we don't need to be setting shooting here. Not going to be setting aiming either. And this focus, we do need to set the focus. That is something that we need to know what our target is, so I'm going to leave that bit in. And we are casting to a BP character, but we actually don't need to cast as far as a BP character because the function is on the mannequin. So I'm going to remove that node and change the cast to a mannequin cast, so cast to mannequin. And we're going to just put the set focus through here. And then with the set focus, I'm just going to move this redirect node over. With our after our set focus, I should say, and with our mannequin, we are going to pull the trigger. And that's what the AI needs to be doing, pull trigger after having set its focus. Just going to add in another little redirect node here so that we've got clear lines. And the execution path, as much as possible, needs to remain straight. So I'm going to save that, compile, go over and play my game. And let's see if the AI is able to shoot at me. Certainly looks like they are, which is great. They're then stopping shooting entirely. So why is that? Well, if I go over to my BT task, then the reason for that is that this event is never stopping. So previously our shooting was kind of an ongoing thing and it only stopped when we aborted it. Now it's not an ongoing thing anymore and we kind of need to tell it to finish executing after the trigger has pulled. So at the end of this pull trigger execution, I'm going to say finish execute. And you must always remember to call finish execute when a BT task has finished, because otherwise it carries on forever until something else tells it to abort, such as a decorator. So I'm going to save, go and play, and hopefully this will cause us now a little bit of trouble, which is that it's rapid firing at us much too quickly. Now, we are going to fix this in a subsequent lecture, but for now, the AI is able to shoot using that BT task. We've re-architected so that we're pulling a trigger from everywhere that is important. So from the first person, when we are a player and we're possessing, it's pulling a trigger. When it's AI, it's also pulling a trigger. Nothing is going via our animation blueprint anymore. So congratulations on doing that re-architecture, and we'll see in the next video how to make the AI behave in a bit more of a sane way with some random bursts of firing that will not sound so crazy as they did before when we had fixed rate firing by both AI at exactly the same time and cause these weird echoes. So we'll be able to make that sound effect much more natural, and the way that they shoot much more natural, and the way that it plays much more fun. And I'll see you in that lecture. Okay, folks, I'm going to stop the live stream because that is the wrap for the video. All I'm going to do now is record a little introduction. So it would be a bit boring for you guys because you've already seen the video. You don't need an introduction. So I'm signing off, and take care.